right, guys, please participate as we go along the town hall and make sure you drop your questions since we'll be answering them at the end of the town hall. So, Edward, let's get started. Ready?
Oh, yeah, let's go.
Great. So, Edward, can you give us a brief description of everything that's happened in the month of May and what is on the agenda for today's town hall?
Yes, so I'll certainly give you some of the headline items. As always, really busy month, and it's looking like it's going to keep that way for the next couple of months at the very least. So obviously the headline item in May was the launch of our NPM utility token on both Arbitrum and Ethereum. And so that's first up on our agenda, and I'll give a quick overview of what happened, and we might cover some of the most frequently asked questions, and we can also cover any questions that the community have today at the end. So yeah, NPM token is really the main thing that we sort of were focusing on over the month of May. And of course, there's a whole lot of other things that stem from that, given the fact that the NPM token now is available on both Arbitrum and Ethereum. We were working on a bridge solution so that users can obviously bridge NPM from Ethereum to Arbitrum and back again if necessary. So we made an announcement a few days ago about the Layer 0 solution, and that is in place. And in fact, earlier today, Seller Network tweeted the announcement that their solution is now available also for the NPM token to bridge from Ethereum to Arbitrum and back. So those are two solutions. There will be more news about our own UI for bridging, so keep following. And there's more news about bridging them NPM tokens. So if I just let me scroll down and we can have a look at the agenda. So NPM, give you an update on that. veNPM, so vote escrow NPM. This is one of a couple of big initiatives that we have, which I'll be talking about today, which is really exciting and hopefully is the reason for putting the design of the veNPM token together is really to drive growth. So looking forward to sharing that and talking to you about that. There is a whole lot of marketing initiatives, both to support the veNPM token as well as the NFT portal. So these are the two initiatives. Don't have time to speak in depth about both of them today, so probably I will cover in depth the NFT portal at the next town hall. But certainly between now and the next town hall, there's going to be a lot of marketing promotion about the NFT series that we have, again, to engage our community, to reward the users of our application, and so on. So those are the headline items: NPM, VE, vote escrow, NPM, and how we're supporting that particular project with a range of different marketing initiatives, all to drive growth. And then finally, happy to answer Q&A from the community about those things or anything else. So that's the agenda for today.
Sounded like a busy month, right? For May for Neptune Mutual. That's amazing. So you mentioned the NPM token. So could you tell us briefly about the NPM token launch on Sushi, on the listing on Uniswap? In particular, there are a couple of questions that we got on the Discord this past month, a few times actually, which might be helpful to run through. First, a number of people asked about the initial listing price of the NPM token on Sushi. And the second part would be, like some people asked whether Neptune Mutual was selling tokens, and if not, who was selling tokens. I think there was some confusion around this topic, so it would be really great if you can walk us through it.
Sure, of course. So the first thing I think to say is that we launched the NPM token, which is a utility token, so that it's available for our users, because as of the 14th of June onwards, it will be a requirement for users of the cover marketplace to have NPM tokens for the validity of their cover policies and for providing liquidity. And also from then on, the instant reporting process will involve staking NPM tokens. So we have written previously about the 5 different use cases and utility of NPM tokens, and it is a core part of the protocol, so it was really important for us to get it out into the marketplace. So that's the first thing. So the second thing is very often, frequently, obviously, those listening in will be very familiar with IDOs, where projects do a lot of marketing just prior to the IDO in order to sell tokens in order to raise capital. Now, Neptune Mutual was very fortunate. We raised a good amount of capital when the market conditions were good in 2022. Many of you have seen all the great investors that we have on board. And we decided that we wouldn't raise capital. So we have launched a token, but it is not the classic IDO where, as I said, projects raise capital by selling tokens. We didn't sell tokens and we didn't raise capital. So that's a really important, I guess, message for people to understand, to have understood about what we've done. So what did we do? Well, we launched on Sushi, on Arbitrum, by providing a liquidity pair, so NPM tokens and USDC on a pool in Sushi. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, given that we didn't want to be selling tokens to raise capital, the tokens have to come from somewhere for people to be able to trade. And so we had and defined the TGE, obviously the token generation event, as being the 1st of May. And for the first vesting period, the very first vesting period for investors, as you all know, we had seed, strategic, and private round investors. Investors were allowed a shorter vesting period for the very first period, so that they had tokens available for sale, so that that would facilitate getting tokens out into the marketplace. So any tokens that were sold and have been sold since the 17th of May have not been Neptune Mutual, and so that's a little bit how the process has worked. So we seeded the pools on Sushi with 50,000 USDC and the equivalent amount of NPM tokens. And if I just go back here to answer another question that was asked a few times, if you can see this in the Discord, and if not, then you can go to dex.guru and copy in the smart contract address of the NPM token, and you'll find the trading history. And you'll see that the NPM USDC pool was priced initially at $0.2 per NPM token. So that is what the pool, that's what we launched the pricing at. The week after, we launched on, we listed the token on Uniswap. And so users can have a look again at dex.guru with same smart contract address, and you'll find that we listed a week later at the same price at the point in time so the same price as the Arbitrum price at the point in time we launched on the Uniswap DEX. And that pool we launched with $100,000 of USDC and the equivalent amount of NPM tokens. So in total, there's now 150,000 US. Well, we seeded both pools, let me put it like that, with 150,000 USDC. Oh. So 50 on one and 100 on the other. And so another question we had around the depth of the liquidity is that or rather to respond to questions around, why and how much and so on. And the answer is, well, there's numerous answers, but we will be continuing to seed more pools as we progress and launch on more chains. So progressively, we will be seeding more and more liquidity as time goes on, as we launch on more pools.
Yeah, I think that was a very asked question in the Neptunite community, so it's good that you're letting us know, and I think it will reassure everyone. So thank you for sharing.
Well, it is important that people get the opportunity to ask questions. Both days of the launch, the first in particular, we were at full stretch. We're a small team, and we did within, I think, a couple of hours or so, get a more extensive response to quite a number of questions. If those of you want to go and have a look at our blog, you'll find the title of the blog is "When We Moon," which was a question which was asked in a Discord channel, which was great because it gave us the opportunity to explain many of the questions that were asked, and in particular how, in relation to When We Moon, so when are we growing, how quickly are we growing, what are the initiatives are we taking to promote Neptune Mutual, and when are we getting to the moon? And as soon as possible is the short answer, but we have some more in-depth things that we can chat to all the community about today, about exactly about the sort of post liftoff, if you like, on that long journey to the moon.
Right. It was a really good article, actually. I read it, and I think the community will appreciate it. If you haven't read it so far, make sure you go to the blog and you look for the When We Moon article. It's a really good read for all the Neptunites. So, thank you for answering these points very clearly. We'll also have a Q&A at the end to cover, live questions from the group. I'm sure as people hear about the initiatives that we're talking about, that we're discussing, some questions are going to come up. So everyone just feel free to type your questions in the chat and we will address them. But for now, you mentioned all these initiatives that the team is working so hard and they're going to make happen to drive project growth. Could you tell me a little bit about what these are? I'm sure the community is very interested in hearing a little bit more about them.
Well, we have, so the two immediate ones, which are pretty big, as I mentioned, are the NFT project, which is really a loyalty rewards program for users of our cover marketplace. So that's really important. And I'd say the NFT initiative allows us to do a number of other things as well. So we have quite a lot of sort of educational, if that's the right word. We have certainly a lot of explaining to do in terms of DeFi insurance. Clearly why it's necessary. Less than 1% of digital assets are covered, despite the fact that there's I don't know, a lot of them, and that most people would accept fairly risky and are subject to all too well-known hacks and exploits that we see on a very regular basis. So on the one hand, there's a lot of those assets. I don't know, probably I think around 48 billion as of today. And less than 1% are covered. Why is that? I think part of the explanation is that people need more information and knowledge about how DeFi cover works, why it's important, and the NFT project will enable us, hopefully, to share some of that information in a way that's interesting, fun, and hopefully impactful and memorable. So that's a little bit about the NFT project, and hopefully that will also align and reward people for using the cover marketplace. And then we move on to the Vote Escrow NPM token that you should be able to see on your screens, and the Liquidity Gauge pool, which I was hoping to chat to you a little bit about today.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, so we can see you're sharing your screen and you have an awesome PPT prepared for us. So
I do. So let me run through it. Interrupt me at any point if you want to stop me, or if any of the community are asking questions, don't hesitate to stop me. So I'm going to start right. I'll start right at the beginning, and we'll have a look at how the rewards, if you like, work in the cover marketplace for liquidity providers, because DeFi cover and scaling DeFi cover to the level it should be requires scaling the DeFi insurance sector from 300 million at least to 3 billion, and that's just for the digital assets as they are. And obviously, as sectors grow, the requirement for DeFi cover should grow as well. So scaling liquidity in our protocol and other DeFi cover protocols matters. So let's just have a look at the returns. So quite simply, in our cover marketplace, firstly, you need to stake some NPM in order to provide liquidity. Liquidity in our DeFi cover marketplace is in stablecoin, USDC. So you provide USDC to a cover pool of your choice. I've given Radiant Finance as just an example so that we can have something that's easy to refer to. We don't yet have a cover protocol, so
is a project token. We just have Radiant Finance as a
exactly. It's just purely as an example for the time being. So take an example, a cover pool, let's say it's Radiant Finance, then you provide USDC, and what you get in return, you get a proof of deposit. Obviously very important to demonstrate that you've actually provided some liquidity and how much liquidity. And what you get primarily in return for that, you get the cover policy fees paid by cover purchasers in USDC. So that is the primary source of return for liquidity providers. So number one, that's the primary source of return. It's fairly transparent, fairly straightforward, and independent of crypto market volatility. Next stage.
We're good so far. Keep going.
Okay, good so far. Stop me if you want. So next stage is the proof of deposit. You can stake that. You can lock that proof of deposit up. If cover creator, so let's say Radiant Finance in a particular example, decide to reward the community for doing so. So Radiant Finance, their native token is the RDX, and if the cover creator decides to reward LPs for providing liquidity to their cover pool, they can do so by providing native tokens. So now as a liquidity provider and LP, you have two sources of return on the capital that you've underwritten.
So rewards and more rewards.
Exactly. So far, so good.
Good.
Okay, so the next step, we add in Neptune Mutual NPM token rewards. Now, where do these come from and how does this work? So these are NPM emissions, if you like. They're emission rewards, and there will be a fixed amount of them for a fixed period of time. So let's say, for argument's sake, that there is 300,000 NPM tokens that will be awarded over the course of a period of time, let's say 1 month. The starting point is an even distribution across the pools. So just to keep it simple, we've got 3 different pools here, and the allocation of those NPM emissions is even across the 3 pools. So that's the starting point. Oops, sorry, let me just jump back. So what has vote escrow NPM got to do with this? Well, firstly, there are 2 goals of the veNPM. The first goal is to influence the allocation of NPM emissions in favor of the cover pool that you've provided liquidity to. So you can see there's 3 different cover pools. We said earlier that in this example, you've provided underwriting capital to Radiant Finance. So what do you want? You want Radiant Finance to have a bigger share of the NPM emissions than the other 2 pools. So you can see that now we've still got the same number of emissions, 300,000, but 200 have been allocated to the Radiant pool and 50 to the other 2 pools. How has that been achieved? That's been achieved through voting. And how do you vote? Well, we'll have a look at that in a second, but the way you vote is with the vote escrow NPM token. So that's the first benefit. By holding one of these veNPM tokens, you can vote in order to in order to get a bigger allocation of the NPM emissions, and thereby getting yourself more rewards when they are minted.
So it sounds like they're gonna be competing, right? The LPs from each project, they're gonna be competing for the rewards, something like that.
Yeah, so voters will be competing against each other to try and get the most allocation of NPM emissions to their particular cover pool or cover pools. That's exactly right.
Nice.
So voting power is one thing, but in addition to that, we also have what we call boost. So not only, or rather after the change in allocation of the NPM emissions, as a veNPM holder, as we'll see in a minute, you can boost the amount of NPM emissions you receive in relation to others in your pool. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So how do you get veNPM? Well, the first thing is you need to lock your NPM in a vote locker. And you have a choice here. So you can either lock them up for a short period of time, so 4 weeks, or you can progressively lock them up for longer and longer and longer periods, up to a maximum of 4 years.
Right.
So
Why?
yeah, why would you do that? And the short answer is the longer that you lock up your tokens for, the more voting power you get and the more boost you get. So if you lock up your tokens for 4 years, you get a veNPM. Having locked up your NPM for 4 years, you get 4 times the voting power and 4 times the boost. So those are definitely worth bearing in mind. One thing to note is that the voting power that your veNPM token has is going to decline over time. So you lock it up for 4 years, and to start with, it has 4 times the voting power, and then after, if you do nothing after 4 years, it'll reduce back down to 1. So what can you do about that? Well, you can continuously, if you like, extend the lock. So like after 6 months or after a year, you can extend your lock, or the locked period, if you like, of your veNPM in order to increase back to a 4 times multiplier, the voting power and the boost power of your veNPM.
Well, that's good. So you have an option to keep that boost, right? To keep that power, you just have to keep locking it up.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So now you have your veNPM, and it'll have a varying amount of voting power or boost depending on how long you locked it up for. You can then start using it, and you use it in the snapshot vote, as we mentioned earlier. In our UI, you'll see there's something called the gauge controller, and the gauge controller is really the indicator of which cover pools are getting how much of the NPM emissions. So this is just like a schematic, and the idea showing here that the Radiant cover pool in mauve is getting twice the allocation of 2 other pools. So it's just a simplified version of what the liquidity gauge controller will look like, so that you can keep track of which cover pools are getting what NPM emissions based on the voting that's been taking place.
Right. Okay. Good so far. Do we have any questions from the community? I haven't heard any questions, so I want to make sure that everyone is. So let's see. Liquidity provider is gonna get 3 rewards. Yes, that's correct. Can you confirm this, Edward? Liquidity provider is gonna get 3 rewards. Are we all on the same page?
Sure. I mean, it does. So the second reward, that's to say the pod staking, does depend on the cover creator. So obviously, Neptune Mutual has control, so to speak, over the NPM tokens, our native tokens that get used as an emission. But it's the cover creators themselves who decide whether that pod staking reward, whether they're willing to provide that or not. So I guess yes is the answer, but as long as you're aware of the fact that the pod staking native token reward is dependent on cover creators, and not necessarily all cover creators will provide that reward. So either 2 or 3 rewards depending on the cover creator.
All right, understood. And we have another question. Can we directly stake the POD to achieve this reward?
Can you directly stake the proof of deposit token for? What's the question?
Can we directly stake the proof of deposit to achieve this reward?
Yeah, so if your cover creator is offering project native tokens, you can stake your pod and get that second reward. If your cover creator is not offering native tokens to reward you, then, well, obviously you can't stake your proof of deposit token.
All right, understood.
Okay. As we move forward with this escrow NPM and liquidity gauge, it's possible that the pod staking reward will, how can I put it, morph into something similar but slightly different in a second stage of development of the liquidity gauge book. So that's just something to bear in mind. But for the time being, pod staking, is available where creators have made their tokens available as a reward.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, onwards.
Yes, go ahead.
Oops. So we, having voted, gone through the snapshot vote, the allocation of the NPM emissions has been reorganized. Now it's the time for them to flow back to the LPs. And how much do you get? So the first thing to understand is that as an NPM holder, you can't boost your rewards. You will get an allocation of as we saw before on how long you've locked up your NPM token for when you locked up the NPM token in exchange for the vote escrow NPM token. So depending on that, and depending on how long you've held your veNPM, because its power and boost declines over time, so you may need to extend it, as we already said, but you can get up to 4 times a boost, so 4 times the number of NPM emissions in relation to somebody, for example, who just holds NPM tokens and has supplied liquidity to that pool. Okay.
Right. Seems like a lot of opportunities for rewards, right?
Yeah, well, definitely. And the reason for that is because DeFi insurance, DeFi cover needs more TVL so that there's more capacity, so that more covers can be written. Demand is growing. We're finding it on the business development side. In terms of speaking to different projects, there's a lot of excitement and interest. And it's really, really important to align the rewards of the protocol with users providing liquidity to underwrite the risks of these parametric policies. So and we'll see how that works, how that plays out.
Yes, definitely. I think I'm going to say the Neptune Mutual team took the phrase "the berries to build" very seriously. A lot of upcoming features, a lot of stuff happening. It looks very promising and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So we have been very busy with this, obviously. Well, I don't know if it's obvious, but this liquidity gauge pool, because it involves tokens and so on, there are smart contracts involved. And as always, we're particularly careful and very, very meticulous in terms of security. As all your, well, hopefully, listeners, you'll all know, block and Open Zeppelin. We spend a lot of time with Open Zeppelin going through the cover protocol and their comments, making sure that all their comments have been taken into account. And similarly, where we have new smart contracts that are going to be launched, we will take our time to get them very, very carefully checked. So this veNPM token and the Liquidity Gauge pool mechanism, we will be getting out onto mainnet as soon as we possibly can, after we're done all the checks and balances to make sure that the security is as good as it can possibly be. So some of it is available on the testnet. If any of you want to go and have a look, there are some parts of this mechanism which are available on the testnet. And yeah, really exciting.
Sounds very exciting. So you heard it. You can go over to the testnet and try it out for now, and then it will be available very soon on mainnet. So Edward, thank you so much for showing us the slides and walking us through that. Let's just see if there are any questions in the chat about this before we move on to another topic. So Neptunite, any questions for co-founder Edward regarding the veNPM token or anything that he has discussed so far? See, no questions so far. Edward, you did an amazing job explaining. We all understood it, so thanks for that. So let's see. So the Vote Escrow, NPM, and the NFT portal are two of the projects that you're announcing that will launch in the next few weeks. I think one of the most asked questions in the community is, what will Neptune Mutual be doing to promote these projects, to raise awareness amongst the wider community and kind of grow the numbers of active Neptunites that are currently using the cover marketplace? So basically, walk us through the marketing and business development initiatives.
Yeah, so I would. Well, that's a great question from the community, and so I guess there's a couple of things. Firstly, so we incorporated right back in 2021, and since then we've been very, very busy building, making sure that the cover marketplace is as good as it can possibly be in every different respect, most particularly in terms of its ability to scale. So scale in terms of liquidity, scale in terms of incident resolution, cover policy holders payouts quickly and reliably. So scale is key, and we've been building a lot over the last 18 months. Now that I would say the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle in terms of the NPM token is out and now in circulation and part of them in play, so to speak. You're now seeing these projects, whether it's the Vote Escrow NPM, the NFT, and there are more, believe you me, in the pipeline. So whilst the building will continue, I think you can all expect to see the marketing in support of these growth projects to grow a lot. Why? Because DeFi cover needs to grow, and in order to do that, part of that solution is having a scalable model, and part is people being aware of it and people knowing how they can benefit from it. And that will only happen if we invest in marketing. And so now I think you'll see a step change in awareness growing. We've got a variety of things. So let me just move the screen on to marketing. So the NFT project, we've got both for the NFT and the Vote Escrow NPM. If you keep an eye out, within 2 weeks you should see an article which is really kicking off the marketing campaign in a major crypto outlet, and that will be the sort of the starting gun, if I can put it like that, for really promoting these projects to drive growth. So an NFT project I'll talk about in the next Discord town hall, because there's really a lot to cover in that, too much to cover along with what we did today. That's really exciting. As of next week, we shall start releasing information about the NFT project. So you'll start seeing that in a variety of places. And we'll also obviously be following up with marketing or promoting the Votesco NPM in the same way across multiple channels. We'll have at least one very, very well-known KOL in a YouTube channel. So we're pretty excited about that. We've got a lot of upcoming interviews in different media, some very, very well known. Not exactly sure when that's going to happen, hopefully sooner rather than later, but just a whole lot of activity across all the media channels. So getting into external or rather media channels that are main crypto news outlets will be good for raising awareness for people who are not already in our communities. And we will also be doing a lot more for those who are in our community. So, for example, for those of you who are subscribed to our Twitter channel, you'll see that we communicate fairly regularly, but from very soon, not sure if it's next week, we will be doing a Twitter space on a regular basis with interesting guests. So again, just expanding what we're already doing, and yeah, just promoting in all sorts of different ways these really important projects.
Understood. So it's not only all the features that are coming out in the marketplace, you guys are boosting the marketing strategy, which sounds amazing. Now I gotta ask, on your slide, is that a preview of the NFT project? Because those look super amazing.
Yeah, so we those who've been following us for a while know that we have been working on NFTs for some time, and what I would say is the project has kind of grown since its inception, and grown very much, I would say, because it's been aligned with rewards of users of the cover marketplace, and for us that's really everything. So. NFTs are great and they're fun and people like them. And obviously, a few very well-known brands have, carved out their own niche. But NFTs purely by themselves as art, for us, was it's okay. And in our particular case, it's also useful because, as I explained right at the beginning, there's quite a lot of different concepts like risk management, and there's quite a few analogies we can use with the sea, in terms of
Storytelling.
Storytelling. So, the sea has its treasures, but if you, in the same way as, you can come across some pretty spectacular and valuable digital assets. But, if you disrespect the sea, if you're not careful, if you don't take precautions, it can bite back in a pretty nasty way. And the same is very much the same with the blockchain space, as everyone will be aware. So there's lots of different narratives that this NFT series allows us to talk about and explain in an interesting way. But over and above that, we decided a few months ago to tie it in with rewarding those people or users who deserved rewarding, and those are users of our application. So that's why it's taken a little bit longer. But now that we have it, I think, what can I say? I think it's will surprise people. I hope so. It's pretty exciting, I have to say. I mean, it's bigger than we anticipated right at the beginning. And I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. So I'm really, really excited to get that finally out. It's going to be a really useful tool for a whole number of different reasons.
It looks very exciting. I mean, from what I can see in the preview, the art looks amazing. It looks like the team did a great job on that. And whatever goes along with it, right? The storytelling role, gonna be very excited to hear about it. So I'm really excited you guys are gonna start launching this soon, and I'm gonna be on the Twitter all the time to make sure I get all the news. So I hope the community is with me on this one, and we'll be checking all the channels regularly to see what's going on. So I think we can give it a few minutes and see if we can get some questions from the community. This will be the time for everyone to drop your questions on the chat. For co-founder Edward, we're at the end of our town hall, so drop your questions, guys. Let's see. We have one. Will NFTs be distributed to testnet winners immediately, or will there be a lock period like the Neptune tokens?
So there have been two different testnet competitions with two different terms and conditions. So I recommend you go and have a look at those. And I'm not too sure, to be honest. I will answer that afterwards as to exactly when you can expect to receive. I don't want to say anything wrong or mislead people. So let us answer that. It's a good question. I should know the answer, but I don't want to get it wrong. So
I think I've heard you discuss this before on other calls that there will be no lock period and it will be distributed exactly when the NPM will be distributed. So no lock period, and also it will be distributed when the NPMs will be distributed. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and the NPM tokens, so there were two different competitions. One had a 6-month cliff, so to speak, and the other had a 9-month cliff. So NPM tokens would be for one group 6 months from the 1st of May, the TGE, and the other group 9 months from the 1st of May, which is the TGE. So that's for the NPM tokens.
Right, understood. That's for the NPMs, not the NFTs. So
exactly,
good to know. All right, so let's give it a minute. Let's see. From Gary, congratulations on launching the token in Uniswap. Amazing. Thank you so much. Getting those good vibes. The daily average trading volume is very small. What is the plan from the team to increase the trading volume?
So that's a good question. And I think there's, as often, a variety of answers. One of those answers is to launch on more chains, so L2 in particular. So launching on another chain will help. And if we launch on another chain, then we're likely to launch on another DEX on that new chain, which will require seeding capital from our side. So more liquidity depth will provide more stability to the token price and obviously encourage trading for those who use that particular chain. So a multi-chain approach is one answer. And the initiatives that we have in terms of growth, so the protest code NPM, and hopefully the consequence of getting more underwriting capital into the cover marketplace will mean that more users will, because there's more capacity, will be able to buy cover. And of course, the more users we have of our marketplace, the more people will require NPM tokens. Because, just again as a reminder, from the 14th of June, you'll need to hold NPM tokens in order to validate the cover policies that you purchased, and you'll need NPM tokens to provide liquidity. So growth overall will mean that there is more demand for NPM tokens, and in turn that will drive, I think, trading volumes on the different dexes.
Okay, understood. And just a quick question: are there any plans to launch on a centralized exchange, because that would also help?
So yes, obviously it would. First point, and yes, we do have ambitions to launch on a centralized exchange because it brings a number of benefits with it. And so as the timing, it's something that we're looking at, and to a certain extent, the more growth that we can achieve in the short term, the better placed we will be in terms of negotiating with different centralized exchanges, and in terms of the launch itself. Obviously, the larger you are, then the more you can benefit from that launch. So definitely something on the radar. We're definitely excited to try and put the right recipe or ingredients in place for growth. And we're expecting a lot of growth, over the next 2 to 3 months in TVL. So keep an eye out. We're expecting a lot of growth and putting the marketing in place to make people aware of the benefits that they can get. So yeah, if we can grow, the faster we grow, the quicker we're likely to be to launch on a centralized exchange.
Okay, understood. Now, in the beginning of the town hall, you mentioned a little bit about the new bridge, which is being released next week. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think we have a solution in place already with Layer 0, and there is also a solution in place with Seller Network. And we will be launching our own user interface very soon. So we've provided users with multiple choices so that they can compare the bridge fees and the time it takes to send tokens from one chain to another. Some of you may be familiar with the fact that depending on the bridge that you use, it can take up to 8 days to bridge from a layer 2 back to a L1, whereas with the Seller Network solution that we've got in place, it takes, I think, around about 30 minutes to bridge an NPM token from Arbitrum back to Ethereum Layer 1. So different users will have different needs and requirements. I definitely recommend that you use either Layer 0 or the Seller Network bridge for the NPM token, because that way you're sure it's going to work. And keep an eye out for the launch of our own UI, which will have those two solutions and uses those underlying technologies for bridging. But our UI will just perhaps make it a little bit easier for people to compare the two and just choose the one that's right for them.
That sounds very, very exciting. Thanks for sharing, Ever. I saw the announcement on the Twitter today, so very bullish. Sounds amazing. Thank you so much. And I think that's it from the questions from the community. So thank you so much, Edward, for joining us today and talking to the community, discussing everything that's happened in the month of May. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We will send an announcement for next week's Twitter space, and we hope to have you there listening and participating. And we'll join for next month's town hall, which will be even more exciting. Thank you, Edward.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for listening in. Do help us on our journey. So as we launch our Twitter space and the other marketing initiatives, anything that you can do to help us raise awareness in other groups, other communities, other chats would be much appreciated. From now on, it's all about growth. So we're excited to be excited for you to be sharing the journey with us, and yeah, looking forward to more updates very soon. So thanks everyone.
Thank you everyone so much.